This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, LifeLock's restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hello, everyone. I'm Therese Bottomly, editor of the Oregonian and OregonLive. This is Beat Check with the Oregonian. Today, I'm talking to Matthew Kish, longtime local business reporter who has covered Nike for the Oregonian, OregonLive, and previously the Portland Business Journal. Matt, welcome back to Beat Check.
Thanks for having me.
So, Oregon has a lot of companies, Matt. Why is Nike so important to us?
Nike is an economic engine in the state of Oregon. It's got more than $50 billion in annual sales. It's actually creeping up on Intel as the biggest corporate presence in terms of revenue. Intel's been struggling, but Nike's approaching it in terms of annual sales. I think more so than that, too, like Nike at its best embodies these Oregon values that we embrace of creativity, of irreverence, of authenticity. It's also become a gravitational force for other companies to come here. So in the past decade, we've had Under Armour, Lululemon, Arc'teryx, and others move satellite offices into Oregon because they want to be near Nike and poach Nike talent. Prosper Portland estimates there are 800 athletic and outdoor firms in the state of Oregon now. So it's a crucial bedrock to the state's economy.
It's amazing, all out there in Beaverton, Oregon. And people may not realize, but Nike around the world, it's something like 78,000 or 80,000 employees. So how many employees does the company have that are, based in Oregon or at least ostensibly report to Oregon?
Somewhere around 11,000. So there have been a couple of rounds of layoffs in the past year. It's going to be somewhere around 11,000. Nike has not released an economic impact report in some time. I think the most recent one they publicly released was 2004, and I went back and looked at that this morning. At that time, the average Nike base salary was 60% higher than the average Metro salary. So these are really good jobs for the local economy.
Really well-paying jobs right up there, as you said, with Intel and other large economic engines in Oregon. So let's look back at the class action lawsuit against Nike. That's kind of the genesis of this reporting that is rolling out and has rolled out on OregonLive and in the Oregonian over the last week. So how did all of that begin? And then how did the media get involved in that lawsuit?
The lawsuit was filed in 2018 by Markowitz Herbold, a 31-lawyer Portland law firm that has a history of battling with Nike in courtrooms. So they have represented other folks with disputes against Nike. In this one, they represented, at first, two former employees with claims that women are devalued and demeaned at Nike. More plaintiffs joined that lawsuit, and they wanted class action status for it. In terms of how the media got involved, as the lawsuit progressed, there was a protective order entered in the case that seals some information from public view. And a couple years into it, the Oregonian, the Portland Business Journal, and Business Insider challenged that seal in the lawsuit and argued for the public's right to inspect judicial records. This is one of the most high-profile pieces of corporate litigation since the Me Too movement, and we argued that the public deserves more information about what's going on in the lawsuit. That first time we went to court, 2022, we got about 6,000 pages of records unsealed. But some of the most crucial documents were not fully unsealed. Some information was still withheld from the public. We went back to court again in 2003 and argued for a little bit more. And that decision went in our favor, but it has since been appealed, and we expect oral arguments next month.
So that's not that unusual for the media to intervene and try to open up documents that are under seal in a high-profile case. As you said, one of Oregon's biggest companies, one of the world's best-known brands, and very serious allegations about the treatment of employees. So as the proxy for the public, we step forward as the media and we ask that judges unseal the records in the public interest. And as you said, that will go before the Ninth Circuit, those arguments next month. The Ninth Circuit will hear those in San Francisco. So at the heart of that class action lawsuit, sticking with that, are something called the Starfish surveys. What are those surveys and what do they tell us about Nike?
Yeah, in late 2017, a small group of senior Nike employees got together, and over a brunch, they started to talk about their experiences at the company, and a hint of dissatisfaction emerged in the conversation. And the group decided they wanted to elevate their concerns with the treatment of workers to CEO Mark Parker. They decided the best way to do that was some sort of survey that would document the experiences of people with sexual harassment and discrimination at the company. Over a couple of months, they collected accounts of employees at the company, and they presented those eventually to CEO Mark Parker in March of 2018. These surveys were codenamed the Starfish survey.
So it was kind of hush-hush. I mean, this was being done, on the down low. There's concern about repercussions. But the people behind it were also kind of expressing a deep affection for the company and kind of in the spirit, they would say, of wanting to make it better.
Yeah, the motivating one of the motivating ideas was wanting to hold Nike up to its stated values and to hold the company accountable. And as you said, the reporting does show that the people involved with Starfish were affectionate about the company and thought it could do better. Nike's also got a history of people kind of painting outside the lines and kind of being irreverent. So that a group of folks would take something on their own shoulders is not that unusual in a company like Nike.
And a large company, 11,000 employees here, it might say, well, gosh, any company is going to have a problem here or there. And so they were trying to establish, I guess, a pattern, right?
Yeah, they wanted to collect a couple stories, make it harder to dismiss. I mean, you can dismiss one or two accounts in a company of 11,000 people, dozens, if not hundreds of surveys with similar themes throughout, much harder to dismiss. And that's what they ended up gathering in presenting to Mark Parker in the spring of 2018.
And they felt Mark Parker, then CEO, was going to be an ally, right?
Yeah, they considered Parker an ally, and the idea was to get the surveys into his hands with the belief that Parker would take action as needed.
And your reporting, which again is on OregonLive, OregonLive.com/business, and has just finished up on the front page of the Sunday Oregonian, has detailed quite a bit of the broad strokes and themes of what the Starfish surveys found, and then what the company did or didn't do in response to that. And there was some disappointment among the folks that you talked to about how aggressive or real the response was on behalf of the company. So the Oregonian OregonLive then sort of became a target of Nike of sorts. We were not part of the lawsuit other than intervening to try to reveal these documents that were under seal, but talk about how we got caught up kind of in the court system.
About a year ago, I met with a lawyer in the class action lawsuit for comment on another story that I was reporting. The lawyer provided me a comment for that story and then provided me some documents to support the comment and inadvertently disclosed to me 31 fully unredacted Starfish surveys, which at the time is seemingly all the Starfish surveys that Nike had argued existed. After we received those surveys, Markowitz Herbold, the law firm, went to court to ask for us to return them. We denied. declined to return them. An order was entered by a judge without hearing our arguments for why we should be able to report on these documents. And after we then were able to enter our own documents in the lawsuit, our right to report on them has been maintained. Nike has since also asked for the return or the destruction of the documents. And judges have continued to rule in our favor, but it's also been appealed to the Ninth Circuit, which will hear arguments in San Francisco at the same time as they're going to hear arguments on the motion to unseal additional documents.
So again, going in front of the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco, coming up here, and we'll of course be covering that, covering the arguments and covering the result at the end, but a classic First Amendment freedom of the press case where, can some outside authority tell a newspaper what they can and cannot do with material that they received through, no fault of their own, just in the course of doing regular reporting. So more to come on that. We mentioned Mark Parker, and he, did some things after Starfish. He apologized, he pledged some things, but Nike has undergone a leadership change. And do you expect that change to really impact workplace culture? And, I would say it's fair to say that the change in the leadership was not related directly to these culture issues we're talking about, probably more related to overall company performance. But do you think there's anything that'll change here with new leadership?
So Elliott Hill was named CEO of Nike in October of last year. Elliott Hill's a 32-year company veteran. He's popular with insiders. He's popular with employees. He has been outspoken about the need for men to be better allies to female employees. He has not spoken about workplace problems, but he's also not spoken about other business issues. So he started in October. He's been doing kind of the retail politics of becoming a CEO, of going around, introducing himself to people, sitting in on meetings for various departments, and kind of familiarizing himself with the business. While he is a 32-year insider, he had previously retired in 2020. So he's coming back to the company, reacquainting himself with people. We do expect in the next few months, he will talk about his plans for the company. I will be listening for anything he has to say about workplace culture as well.
And this is not the only reporting that you've done on Nike recently. I mean, you cover it as a beat, but you've also done some deeper dives, such as this series on Starfish surveys, which we'll put links to in the episode notes. But you've also partnered up with ProPublica, a national investigative website. Rob Davis, reporter there, and ProPublica, reporting out some other Nike stories, which some of which published last year. So tell us a little bit more about that project.
Yeah, the broad sweep of the project we're doing with ProPublica is really trying to test Nike's claims about corporate responsibility. So last year, we looked at some of Nike's environmental claims. So about 8 years ago, Nike announced what it called a moonshot goal. It wanted to double its revenue, and it wanted to have its environmental impact. So to Nike's credit, it discloses quite a bit of information about its carbon footprint, both at the Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 level. So as we looked at those documents, what we saw is that Nike's carbon footprint was actually up a little bit since 2015. So despite the very public commitments and very bold commitments to having its environmental impact, Nike hasn't gotten there. What was also interesting in that reporting is that Nike had a couple of round of layoffs in the past year, and those layoffs disproportionately hit people who work on sustainability and who are trying to innovate and come up with ideas that can help Nike cut down on its emissions. So it didn't seem that the corporate priorities of commitment to the environment were really playing out in terms of workforce changes at the company. We also took a look at Nike's private jet use. So the company has private jets. They are a very small part of carbon emissions for a company the size of Nike, but an interesting one to look at because the decision to use a private jet is a decision that is directly in the hands of the senior executive who's traveling on the jet. And what we saw with Nike's private jet emissions was a 20% increase in the carbon footprint since 2015, the year that Nike uses as a baseline for its carbon goals.
So two things that are really at once powerfully symbolic, but also real, the symbolism of telling everyone you're going to care about sustainability, but laying off quite a number of people who work on that. And then two, saying one thing about carbon emissions and on the other hand, jumping on a private jet to make it easier for you to get from place to place. So really, really interesting work. But Nike at the end of the day is a manufacturing company. I mean, what can they really, what can they do to improve? What have others done to improve? And would it move the needle, a company of that size, if they really were successful at reaching their goals? What effect would it have?
So we continue reporting on Nike's corporate responsibility claims and its environmental claims. So Scope 3 factory emissions are the biggest source of carbon for a company that makes products. So we continue to look at Nike's carbon footprint in the decisions that it's making. Nike, in its comments to us, they have maintained that they remain as committed as ever to sustainability. They also have gotten a power sharing agreement in Vietnam that they think could be pretty helpful to bringing down their carbon footprint in Vietnam. We'll be very interested to see how that plays out because the agreement was just signed last year.
Great. And let's talk a little bit about Phil Knight. He's been a huge factor in Oregon for years, for decades, from his ownership of Nike to his support of U of O, and in particular the athletics at U of O and OHSU, to other philanthropy. I mean, what role does Knight play now in the company, if any?
Yeah, his formal title is Chairman Emeritus, which means he's invited to board meetings and he has a non-voting position on the board. In actuality, he's a lot more influential than that. Not only does his stock is controlled by a holding company that elects the majority of the board, but he's influential. He's well respected in the company. I don't think it should surprise anyone that when Elliott Hill was announced as CEO, one of the first comments out of Nike was from Phil Knight. And Phil said he's looking forward to seeing Nike back on its pace because the company struggled in recent years. So he's very much still an important part of the company. Another interesting part of the Knight story, which maybe doesn't get as much attention as it should get, is his philanthropic efforts. So Knight has put a lot of his shares and his resources into a private foundation, which is now a $5 billion private foundation, which by IRS laws is required to give away a certain percentage of its assets annually. And we have started to see that story play out in recent years, and I think we'll continue to see it play out in coming years.
Yeah, Phil and Penny Knight and their foundation have done amazing things around the state in terms of supporting, everything, like we said, from U of O to OHSU to medical advances and everything else. So really interesting. So I'm going to put links to all of Matt's coverage from the past week in the story notes and also the ProPublica coverage. Matt, thanks for all your reporting on this.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll call it a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to Beat Check with the Oregonian. If you like this show, give us a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts. It really helps people find the show. Tell a friend, help spread the word. The best way to support our journalism and stories like these is with a subscription to OregonLive. You can do that at OregonLive.com/pod support. Until next time.